Very good evening to you and welcome to Politics 101. It's a Tuesday evening and it's a wonderful evening. I want to welcome everybody down to the program, whether you're joining us from Guyana or you're joining us from the wider Caribbean or you're joining us from North America, Europe. Welcome down to Politics 101. Trust that you had a restful weekend and that you're ready to face the week. Of course, we are 2 days into the new week. Welcome to Politics 101. Lots to talk about today. Lots to talk about today since we left off last week. Of course, Mr. Sugate had broken when we left off last week, of course. Vice President Jack Dio and that famous interview with the journalist from Vice News in the United States, asking him pointedly whether he was in the business of taking bribes. And he gave his answer, and the rest is history. So we're going to be talking about Mr. Sugate. It's been called in some quarters, so we're going to be talking about that. The USAID, part of the United States State Department, they have come out with a report, an assessment of democracy in Guyana. And of course, what caught my eye with that report was that it described the election, the 2020 election, described by the USAID, part of the American government, describing our election as a contested election, of course, and recommending that in order for there to be equitable governance of Guyana's oil wealth, there should be power sharing between the two major political contestants. It argued that the parliament, Guyana's parliament, cannot be a place where you get any kind of unity between the two parties, any kind of consensus between the political contestants. It therefore argues for power sharing as a political solution to Guyana. We're going to be talking tonight about why that is important. We also learned, and this is old news, but it's still there pending, there's still not been any final solution to the problems of leadership within the People's National Congress. There was some movement, and then there was another stalling. We know that former Minister of Education, Nicolette Henry, resigned from Parliament. Then we heard that she hadn't turned in her resignation officially to the Speaker. And then we learned that she did, but that her resignation would not take effect until April or March or sometime. I can't remember what date it was. But that issue has not gone away. And as we speak here, there is the energy expo, the energy expo that is being held currently And the big news is that the opposition was not invited, and then the government says, yes, the opposition was invited, and so forth. But the story is that there is this big energy expo, and the opposition is not part of it. So those are some of the big issues in the news that we are going to be talking about this evening. We're going to get behind the news, as we call today's segment. We're going to have the experts in to get behind the news, because you see, the news is the news, but often there is a lot behind the news, a lot that is not readily available sometimes. There is a lot that is not easily discernible by the naked eye. So what we're going to do here on Tuesdays is that we're going to get behind the news every Tuesday. From now on, that's what we're going to do on Politics 101. So welcome to the program. Please share so that more people know that Politics 101 is on. Of course, it's the month of February. It's Black History Month, so we're going to have our fair share of Black History programming on politics. But tonight, we're going to bring in the experts to take us behind the news. Our guests tonight are regulars: Dr. Henry Jeffery, political scientist and political commentator; Christopher Ram, chartered accountant, political commentator, leading member of Article 13, a new organization that is on the scene. I suppose the name of the organization hasn't really caught on yet, but the name comes from that article in our Constitution that talks about inclusive government. And it's one of the advocates of constitutional reform and rule of law. And later on, we're going to be joined by Adam Harris, a regular. He's going to be coming in a couple of minutes. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics 101.
Thank you very much.
Lots to talk about tonight, but let's start with what's just before us. There is this energy expo that is being held. One assume it's to talk about oil and gas. The opposition claimed it was not properly invited. The government claimed that it is invited. The opposition, the usual story. But let's start off by talking about why this energy expo and why is it important to Guyana? What is it doing for us? This energy expo. Start with you, Henry.
Thank you very much, David and Chris. Hope all is well.
Yes, thank you. Good.
Well, what it is doing for Guyana, I'm not certain at all. But
I need the two energy booklets we got today.
When you bring all these people together that are important people, it would appear that the eyes of the world would be focused, or at least the people in the world that are concerned and deal with oil and that sort of a thing, will be more or less focused on Guyana and what kind of policies they have and how they would be treated if they try to invest and all that kind of a thing. Of course, there will be there should be a section that should deal with the problems Guyana has with the present oil arrangement, 2% and all of that. Somebody should be speaking there to these issues. I therefore believe that it is a useful kind of a thing if properly organized. Let me tell you something, David. Most of these things in Ghana can be useful, but if one party sit down and believe and they and their colleagues can organize it and run it, well, that is the problem, because it will, even if it's not biased, will be perceived to be biased, and that politics is about perception. The PVP, it is not no. If you're going to organize a energy conference, certainly this shouldn't be, oh, it has been organized and the PNC was invited. It should have been something raised in at least a collegiate kind of a way, and the PNC and other parties should have been on the ground as part of the representatives in the organization of how this thing go forward. You can't just organize your thing and then send me a whole invitation to come, because it's set. So when people say PNC should,
we seem to be having some technical difficulty there. Go ahead. Yes, you're back on. We're not hearing you. There's some sound problems there. Sound? We're not hearing you. Dr. Henry Jeffery there, sorting out his sound. Mr. Christopher Ram, why Henry is... Yeah, we're hearing you now, Henry.
Yes, I don't know how long you weren't hearing me, but as I said...
you were talking about, organizing, that the opposition should have been part of the
organizing process. Right. So now you would have had this quarrel about, this is Ghana oil, this is not a PPP oil, and therefore you're in government with what is less than what it takes to take a seat. That's the point the Americans were making, that you go now, you organize your conference, and effectively you can set the agenda. Setting the agenda is important for any meeting. And then you just invite me. I don't know. If I was the PNC and almost represent half of this country, I'll say, man, you better hold your meeting by yourself, because I wasn't part of how you organize it. I don't know what I'm coming there to meet. I have no input, particularly in the presentations that are made, who you invite and who you did not invite. So effectively, I would have been most concerned about it. So, but that's me. I believe that's one of the most important things, not so much what is done, it's the process of doing it. And everything in this country is like that, so far as I'm concerned. The process must be inclusive. The process should allow me to be part of the process, not only me, but other NGOs to be part of the process of dealing with Guyana oil. If you want call this thing national, but it's not because you are government, you are national. You are partial indeed, because it's a political party. It doesn't mean partial. You got to win substantial votes to become national. You got to be substantially all of us to be national, not because you're in government and you say I'm the government, and as you said, the Americans say, well, contested. It means quite clearly that the issue of whether or not you're the government is not even over. So that's my position on that issue.
Christopher Ram, you can come in here. You have been very much part of the discourse on oil and gas. Have you been invited to participate? And what do you think of what Dr. Jeffery said?
Well, I am participating, for sure. We participate both as an exhibitor and we participate as an attendee. I wonder if it is clear that this International Energy Conference and Expo, which clearly had a significant input from the government, is not sponsored by the government. I don't know if Dr. Jeffery was under that impression. This is being sponsored by someone called Anthony J. White, and he, in his message on a booklet charting a sustainable energy future, he describes himself as chairman, International Energy Conference and Expo, Guyana 2022. Now, it is clear that the government had more than a passing interest, but this is not a government conference. We had today, you had the heads, apart from our own president, you had the president of Ghana, you had the president of Suriname, and you have the prime minister, Mia Mockley, who made a brilliant speech, I guess as she always does, at the morning session. I'm extremely disappointed that the opposition party did not seem to think it was important enough. You know, it's always to sit on the sidelines and come on television and complain and gripe. But I can tell you, I did see Mr. Roysdale Ford at the conference today. And I think he was there as a delegate. But I can only say I think so. I came away from the conference. It still is going on, but I'm not sure how much more I'll be participating, because unlike Henry, I have a different perspective. I don't only go there to listen, I go there to participate. Participate cannot mean listening. There was a session on local content. The moderator was actually three-quarter backing the audience. He was essentially talking to a Ministry of Natural Resources representative, one from, and three from subcontractors, the chairman of the Private Sector Commission. They didn't take a single question. And I was interested in asking questions because, for one thing, what were being held as historical facts were completely wrong. But so I'm not sure. I went up to the moderator later on, and the chairman of the session, Mr. Alex Graham, and I said, look, if that's what it's going to be, I don't think I'm interested any longer. The other thing is this, and here I agree with Henry. This agenda, but you got to be, you got to understand that it's whilst there was a lot of government participation. Vice President Jagdeo will be speaking twice. The president has spoken. The Minister of Natural Resources will be speaking. Lots of representation from subcontractors, and to some extent from contractors. I was also very disappointed in the contribution by Chairman Darren Woods, Chairman and CEO of ExxonMobil. Instead of making a feature address, I thought what he did, he made brief remarks. He was on to make a feature address. He made brief remarks. The sum total of what the government, the president, who I thought made a very useful speech. and the vice president and Darren Woods, essentially they're saying, leave this contract alone. You hear all kinds of nonsense about sanctity of contract. Of course, there's sanctity of contract. I was featured in a story for the Kaicho News last weekend, and I said, I predicted that the president and the vice president will be meeting Darren Woods, the chairman of ExxonMobil, privately. That turned out to be true. And I said that they should be talking about this contract, this lopsided contract. And I said they should do that both privately and they should do it publicly. Clearly, nothing has changed. The government, both the president and the vice president, made a strong case, although one can say it's rebuttable, and we can get into that later, why we should continue to have exploration. In fact, accelerated exploration was the term that was being used. And the justification is, look, we're net zero in terms of carbon emission by whatever time after Myler and the gas assurance zone, we will be even netter of net emission. So we do not have to worry. Accelerated exploration is the policy of the government.
Yeah. So, Chris, thanks for that. Thanks for that report, because it's very important for us to know what went on there. And thanks for that report. Let me ask you this pointed question that is coming from one of our viewers. What benefit, therefore, has this conference been to Guyana?
I just said I'm not sure I'll be going to the conference tomorrow, even though I've paid close to $400 for the 3 days.
So you're saying there's no benefit, or you're saying there's benefit? What?
Well, if I'm not going, it couldn't have been a hell of a lot of benefit, David.
Okay, all right. Let me just, our audience sometimes like direct answers. Let me bring you back in, because
let me just say this to Chris, that when I read the papers, they said that Guyana Expo was involved in the helping to organize this conference. I always thought that Guyana Expo has something to do with the government. And as I don't know, I mean, you are saying they are not. But even if the Guyana Expo has nothing to do with the government, as you rightly said, the government was involved in this arrangement. It was there. And it's even for the government and the persons who are organizing to know that they're in opposition. You know what has happened here? Because of the way the government treats the opposition, a private company can come into Guyana and treat the opposition just like that. And that is the problem. They're allowing people to form a conference without saying to them when they're doing this conference, even if it was Guyana Expo or not, the government and it's a private sector. We are here, and therefore, if you're doing something like this with oil that is not only for 5 years, it's generational thing, don't you think you should be inviting the thing to be part of the process that we are involved in? That is the major problem here. I am saying to you, that's fine. People must go to the conference, and the issues you raise, as I said, about 2% and all that kind of a thing, should be raised. And I have no doubt that you have always participated in every meeting you have gone to. You don't go to a meeting and sit down. No, when I said you got to listen, but you got to listen before you speak. And therefore, if there's something to speak, they should have given you have written over 41 articles or something.
96 or 96.
96 on oil. They should have given you something to say on oil on that day, instead of saying to you, well, maybe they should always ask a man such as yourself to pay. But the point is that they should give you access. They should give you access to make a presentation. And they can wash their hands of your presentation, because they would say there are views in Guyana that needs to be heard. And as a result of it, Mr. Ram has been expressing some of these for a very long time, and he should be given whatsoever. Now look where you are. You're telling me that the process has gone on and you're not even going back. So maybe you shouldn't have gone in the first day, because all you went there to realize that's a waste of time. I am not saying it's a waste of time. All I'm saying to you, that process always means something to me. And if you have a process that leaves out half the people of this country, you are not in the right place.
Dr. Henry Jeffery, Christopher Ram here, talking about the energy conference that is going on. There seems to be a strong position here that all was not well. Dr. Jeffery making the point that the opposition, which represents 47, 48, 49% of the votes, were not part of the process. Mr. Ram, of course, differed slightly there. He said he went, and as you heard it, he's not going back. Let's move to the next issue that I want to talk about. That is the USAID report. I've extracted two things from the report. The report said that the election 2020 election is a disputed election. I'm using the right term, a disputed election. They also went on to say that the parliament, this is my word, Dr. Jeffery liked to use those words too. The parliament is a waste of time. If you look into the parliament to bring about some national consensus, it's not going to happen. And therefore, they recommend a removal from the winner-take-all mentality towards a power sharing arrangement in order to govern the country's oil resources. Now it's coming from the Americans, and it is important because it's coming from the Americans, because of the role the Americans played in giving the impression that the elections of 2020 were not disputed. They were above board. Also, Henry and Chris, I would like to remind that the question of power sharing was raised during the 5 months as a settlement to the dispute, right? And some civil society organizations, many civil society actors, the PTT said no. The elections is not a disputed election. There is a winner. Now the Americans are saying it was a disputed election. And furthermore, one party can't manage this country. We need to have both parties. Gentlemen, what is the significance of that report? Henry Jeffery, I'll start with you.
Yeah, but you should start with Chris, because you know for 10 years I'm saying precisely those words the American wrote, and he knows that too. 10 years, almost 20% of the articles I wrote, it was, was on this, that this going nowhere until you share part. So maybe you should start with Chris, and because I love to hear, because all you are saying, well, the American says, why is that?
Yeah, right. Chris, what's the significance
Henry, have you taken over the program?
But I give him permission for this segment.
Not at all. I'm just saying, because I like to hear from you, because everybody know my position. Everybody should. During the election, I stood up. I spent my own money, $1 million. I'm a poor man. I went on the television.
No poor man has $1 million to spend.
I said, please, as part of the party I was in, I said that this thing needs shared governance. It's going to go nowhere. I said that. And well, so you are. I mean, you shouldn't even be asking me that
Yeah,
kind of
but quick,
thing. I know it's for the audience. I know it's for the audience. But even so, I mean, I can't be asked that.
Yeah, and I just want to go on record to say I get kicked out of the Kaicho News to say that. Anyhow, Mr. Christopher Ram.
Yes.
Yes. What's the significance of this report from your standpoint?
I think what the American thinks or says is significance. The problem, David, and your party was in government for 5 years. It needs to say what it did on power sharing. This has been the constant refrain, and nobody wants to take the bull by the horn, first of all, to decide, are we talking of sharing ministries? Are we talking of inclusivity in the Article 13 type of thing? Are we talking of more power to local government and less control of local government by central government? Are we talking of ridding ourselves of, as the report says, the winner take all mentality? Are we talking of maybe in some things like the budget?
Yeah,
that
but
you say, can I finish?
Chris, all right, go ahead. But I just want, I know what you're saying is important, but let's confine ourselves to the U.S. report. It is clear that the U.S. is talking about executive power sharing. It is very clear that's what they're talking about. So let's confine it to that for the moment.
All right.
Yeah.
They themselves did not define power. I haven't seen the whole report. Have you?
Yes, I have.
You should have shared it with us if you knew you were going to bring it as a substantive issue. I have not seen it. And therefore, I am not competent to discuss it in a definitive way. What I'm seeing in the press...
What do you think of the report saying that the election was disputed?
Well, no, it's a matter of fact that the elections have been disputed. There's an election petition. It's not whether I think or not think. That's a fact. That's what an election petition is.
The disputed election itself has affected governance since the election. No?
Sorry, can you ask back that question?
No. That the report is suggesting that the fact that the election was disputed has had an impact on governance, especially in the area of oil, since the election. Hence the call for a movement away from winner takes all.
It's clear that every little thing, every matter, affects issues in this country.
Right.
Obviously, an election is always a flashpoint of an issue. The fact that it hasn't yet been resolved is really unfortunate. I think the court system should get into this matter as urgently as possible. This is why on the question of election petitions, the law requires that it be held from day to day. In other words, no big break here, and we adjourn to next month. So you get it and you get it out of the way. So that's certainly, once you have election, you had election petitions. And don't forget, there was an election petition on the 2015 elections that is still not heard. Now, would you say that affected governance in the coalition government? If it applies to one, it must apply to the other.
But the PPP did not pursue its contestation of the 2015 election. Mr. Ramatar made that very clear. Although they didn't recognize that the government was legitimate, they didn't pursue it. So that petition does not have the same resonance as the 2020
Well, all you have to do, David, what I'm saying, this matter of the election petition 2020 ought to be taken up and say, look, we need to deal with this. But you have a circus going on in the PNC, and that is really that itself is affecting governance in this country. Because what you have, the government thinks, okay, they have so many problems across there, we can do as we wish. We have a budget passed without a leader of the opposition, unprecedented in the history of this country, David.
Henry, let me bring you in here and to deliberate some more on that, the significance of that report. Chris, you're on TV. Yeah.
The king is dead long.
I can still ask for property.
Always a leader of the opposition, acting or not. There's always one.
Yeah.
So that's no big shake so far as I'm concerned, because there is not that they're going to do anything great down there anyway. They did nothing great, and they were not expected to do anything great down there. I agree with Chris in the sense that these matters should be completed quickly, and I do agree that in 2015 it was not, and even before that with Sarmines and Seats and Linden and all of that, that situation exists. It's a Guyana situation. Now, that is why we must think twice. We know that this has been the historical problem. We know even when Ms. Jagan election was vitiated, it took years before the decision. That is why we should also know when we are saying hand government over to people, hand government over to people who would then have the capacity to slow the process down. When people are saying at the time, GCOM has, and now the court seems to be saying it, when the GCOM has the capacity to deal with this issue and finish it, that should have been the process. But yes, we can't do it, GCOM, sir, because you got cross-examined witnesses. That's not a balderdash. GCOM is making a managerial decision. You ain't got cross-examine no witnesses. But so effectively, what we face in Guyana is a problem, as Chris rightly pointed out. But it's you have to recognize that it's a problem that has to be solved and solve it. Not just say 2015 and then 2011. It is something we always saying that, day to day they must doing it. They're not doing it day to day. We know that. Therefore, Chris knows that. I know that. And therefore, when it happens at a time, we should be saying, no petition. No, let it be solved now. Don't let them hiding after it goes there, after it's done. As I was saying, GCOM had the capacity. Now I hear this the Chief Justice saying, so yes, GCOM had the capacity to deal with the issues of the day. Now, that is what should have occurred. Not to say, pass the government over to people who have all the interest of not having the court system run, and then later come and say, it's the court system. Really?
Yeah. And you know, like I am intimating, I think the problem was staring us there during the 5 months, and it could have been solved during the 5 months. Some of us proposed an interim power sharing government, and people said, no, somebody won the election, let them go in. And of course, the Americans went along because the Americans had a particular interest at that time. The government in America has changed, and perhaps there is a change of interest. Now Americans are saying that election was disputed. It's a kind term. Dispute is a kind term. I think that dispute, they meant something more than dispute. They're recognizing that the elections showed that there is need for power sharing. I think that is very clear to me in this report. I understand that there are people who stuck their necks out and said one party won the elections. Now that the Americans are saying nobody won the election and you should share the government, people are left holding, I won't say what. And it's difficult for them now to walk that back. America as a country, they look after their national interests. And what some of our commentators and civil society people missed during that election was really the fundamental problems of this country. And we had a golden opportunity to do what the Americans are now telling us we should do. And we squandered it. And we handed government in a disputed election to one party. We are now reaping the so-called rewards of it. I see Mr. Adam Harris is here. Prime News, formerly of Kaitor News fame. Adam, you've been following the USAID report that said that elections in 2020 was a disputed election and that we should have power sharing. What do you think?
Well, in the first instance, the word power sharing doesn't convey an image to my mind. How do you share power? Do you split up the seats in the ministry and you give the opposition some and you keep some? How do you deal with the leadership? Do you make the president a rotating one? Power sharing. What is really the power? Is it the power to govern the country? Who would plan?
Adam, the Americans have identified what they think is the power. The power to govern the oil resources. They're very clear about that. All the details about it, if they agree, Americans are saying, you have oil resources. One party has been trying to govern it for 18 months. It has not worked. Now two parties must sit down and govern the oil. Over to you, man.
Okay,
do you disagree with that?
Well, I suppose it has to do with the fact that I have never experienced it. Yes, when we had an arrangement way back in 1953, we could have called that power sharing if it was a question of sharing the whole party issue and
but we
the
didn't have
colonial.
power then to share. We were a colony, so we didn't have power then to share.
All right. Well, in this case,
we have the power of oil now. So we know what power is now. If we didn't know what it was before, we know what it is now. The Americans are saying one party cannot control it.
In that case, there is a system to create organizations like the one that they're putting up for the Natural Resources Fund and all of that. If the power sharing is along those lines, where the parties are going to have an equal say in the organizations or the body that they put up, I'll agree with that. Unlike the situation now, where the president has the ultimate and perhaps the only say in creating this body to govern the Natural Resources Fund. If power sharing has to do with electing the judges, electing or appointing the commissions, yes, that is what should happen. It shouldn't create any problems. We have the odd number syndrome where the government would have the majority on these commissions. Is that really sharing power when it comes down to the vote and the person with the biggest majority wins? Is that power sharing? That's why I said I don't understand the issue of power sharing. We must be specific. Let us go down the middle on the resources, for example, the Natural Resources Fund and whatever. Let us go down the middle on appointing the commissions. Let us go down the middle in determining national issues. Other than that, if you just put some token heads in what we would call the seat of government, then who has the majority will have the final say, as was the case in the budget debate. The government had the majority, so regardless of what the opposition said, the government had the final say. That wouldn't be power sharing in my mind. Yes, you had a say, you can say what you like. The decision comes down to the government. That is not power sharing. So if they're talking about power sharing, it must be a case of the major organizations, except perhaps the seat of government, going down the middle. That's my concept of power sharing.
Henry Jeffrey, you know more than all of us here about power sharing. As you said, you've written a lot about it. Adam raises what is really one of the issues that we have in Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean. Because power sharing conversation has been around since Guyana raised it in 1961, right? 60 years. But it seems as though we are so wedded to the Westminster winner take all thing that sometimes it's difficult to wrap our minds around. I remember Desmond Hoyt, who had to be brought around to power sharing, but eventually got around there. Really had a real conceptual problem in wrapping his head around power sharing. Speak to that for us.
Yeah. I don't know how to start. First of all, the type of power sharing that Guyana was speaking to was offered to the PPP during the independence discourse. The question was sharing executive power. There is no other power to share. The executive must share. It's not setting up a committee and then the executive who controls the ruling party go to parliament and do what they like. It's executive authority we are talking about. Ministers of government, cabinet position. You have a power sharing cabinet in other words. When you go to cabinet, it's not just PPP or maybe even PPP and PNC, but others. And what comes out of there, as in so many other places, is consensus. It's a consensual thing. If you had the PNC at the budget in the cabinet, that budget would never have come out like that. Never. And even if it had come out like that, the result is you would have got a national consensus because they would have had to go and explain to the people why it's like that. The PPP got no capacity to explain to the PNC supporters and convince them that budget is a proper budget. So effectively, we are talking about executive, not no committee, not anything in parliament. Inclusivity, the PPP wrote their thing when the PNC came out in about 2002 and said, well, we want shared government. The PPP wrote a thing about inclusive government. Indeed, they will claim that all those committees you got in parliament now, Committee for Women, Amerindians, and all of that, they will say that's inclusive governance, but it is rooted in the winner takes all philosophy. The majority wins the day at the end. So when you are talking about power sharing, you're talking about power sharing where the power is. The power is in the government. And furthermore, anywhere the Americans have been involved in this, don't worry, let's forget the independence. When they had to go to Northern Ireland, they shared the executive. The Catholics and the Protestants had to share the executive equally so that one man can't move without the other. And today, when Boris Johnson is trying to mess around with that thing by his Brexit, the European community and the Irish people see that as one of the fundamental things, the Good Friday Agreement. You don't have that sort of thing. You have power sharing in Switzerland, where you have a rotating president who are ministers, but they rotate every year. One time a year, 5 people, one time a year. And so effectively, what you have is a presidency and not a president that walks around strutting himself and doing all manner of things. You have a presidency of the three largest party. The two got two each, and the third one's got one. And Switzerland is considered one of the best countries running the world. But as David rightly says, this is not our tradition. We have not come from this. And all we can think is majority rule. If majority rule was the end all and do all of democracy, America would not be a democracy. There would have never even been a federation, because Rhode Island has 1 million people. California got 40 million people, and both of them got 2 senators. Amount. Today, when we look at it, the years have passed, we tend to say that things should change and all of that. But go tell it to Rhode Island in any sensible way. So you have to think about what you're doing. Democracy is about constitutionalism, and the constitution should be reformed periodically so that it corresponds to a consensus of substantially all of us. Not all, but substantially all. Over 80% must agree with this constitution before you go with it. 80% don't have a situation here for any majority one-party rule. Essentially, when the party in power, not only the election is disputed, but the point is that they are in power by less than more it takes to bring a seat. So that's what I mean. I'm not going to no committee. Committee is second level power and all that thing. I'm talking about shared governance. If you want to stop this nonsense in Guyana, shared governance is what it has to be. As I said, I've been saying it for 10 years. Every word American wrote in that thing, I've written and said before.
Yes, and I want to endorse that sentiment. I want to make 2 quick observations. What is little known is that during the time of the making of the American Constitution, there were 2 proposals: the New Jersey plan and the other plan from the big states. And the New Jersey plan, which represented the view of the small states, they were calling for what they call a collective presidency. They didn't want a one-person presidency. But of course, that was voted on. The second thing I want is to answer Mr. Ram and somebody else, other people in the audience. The coalition campaigned on shared governance, power sharing, and when it got into power, it didn't lift a finger. And I want to share that criticism. I want to say without fear of contradiction that my party, the Working People's Alliance, is the party that fought the hardest to get power sharing onto the coalition's platform. And when the coalition got into office, it did not lift a finger. I want to say that I, as an individual, wrote about 5 articles. They're there after be Isabel de Carey's now, criticizing and condemning the coalition for not pushing for power sharing. What should also be remembered, however, is that when the coalition came to power, Mr. Granger, I remember well, said, I am holding out the olive branch to the PPP for power sharing. The PPP said, we are not interested. So we have to make the criticism that in spite of that, the government should have pushed harder. They nominated Nagamutu, and the PPP used that as an excuse to say we are not engaged in the process. My view is that the coalition should have pulled back Nagamutu and nominate somebody else and let the PPP reject it, but they didn't. And in that regard, they have to bear full responsibility for not pushing harder for power sharing, which they promised the electorate. I just wanted to lay that out there so that people don't say I'm calling for power sharing because the coalition lose. I come from a party that's been calling for power sharing from its inception in 1974 as a pressure group. And our elder UC Kwayan was the first Guyanese politician to call for power sharing as far back as 1961, when he called for a joint premiership between Dr. Jagan and Mr. Burnham. And as Henry would say, I have a whole book on power sharing. The lesson. Let's move on. Let's move on. Mr. Sue has become now part of everyday language. Adam, you came in late, and I think you were an old school teacher. The students come in late, they got catch up.
Got to.
So, tell us about what is the significance of this development now with Mississippi.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that the government moved to nullify the comments and accused the reporter, Isabel Young, of, they called it what? Some special interest. Yeah, you know. Now, I wanted to say two things. One, the reporter is highly qualified. That reporter, according to the records, won 2 Emmys. And those who are familiar with those awards know that they're top class awards. That reporter in a magazine named Women's Daily, I think it was, or something of the sort, had that reporter as one of the 50 influential women in the world. So this wasn't a fly-by-night reporter. This reporter went on the ground in Syria. She went to China, was accosted by the Chinese government, had to delete footage and all kind of things. So she's been there. To come and ask Mr. Jagdio a specific question, and that's why I laughed. He, in Guyana, we got the tradition of saying, well, I don't have to disclose my source. But this reporter disclosed her source and took Mr. Jagdio completely by surprise. As I am swallowing, as I am drinking water, hemming and hawing and all of that. He couldn't say he didn't know the man because he wasn't sure how much information this girl had with or from Mr. Sue. So that was a given. So he denied. Denying was one thing, but racing to hold a press conference the very next day after the thing came out and trying to get on this American-based program, Globe Span, to just talk about this thing and perhaps to attack the messenger is most remarkable. If you come to me and you interview me and you say, Adam, are you a thief? And I say no. And I would say, who gave you that information? And I would say, sorry, or you say, look, the information came from so and so. I would ask for a confrontation. Could you kindly bring this person? Let us meet this person and let's sit face to face and exchange it. I will run to hold a press conference behind your back and say, no, this man say I'm a thief and this man. I wouldn't do that. And no right-thinking person would do that. Mr. Christopher Ram has been in situations like that. And he defended himself when he asked for, he didn't say, provide the evidence. He said, if there is this person and you name the person, let us meet with this person and let us ventilate the issue. So Mr. Sue was credible. I looked that Mr. Sue told Isabel Young that she has put his life in jeopardy, that he may have to flee the country. Now, that's a remarkable statement. The beauty is that Vice News hasn't released its edited version of the program. And I'm sure when they do, we would have evidence of Mr. Sue saying what he did. That is where it would be interesting, because like how 60 Minutes do it, you put one, you have the other. It would have been nice to have Mr. Sue and Mr. Jagdeo sitting side by side, and one trying to refute the other. I don't believe Mr. Sue is a madman to accuse an individual of something when that isn't true. Knowing that this man is his neighbor, knowing that this man can confront him at any time and all of that, I don't think he's a madman. And then the AFC made an interesting point about the revocation of the contract for I think it's the Harbor Bridge. Now, if the Harbor Bridge contract was awarded by the tender board and accepted by all, why after then you're going to pull it and tell me, well, the price is too high? You had to see the price of the tender board. So something went wrong after the Sue revelation.
Some revelation. Christopher you've been mighty quiet recently. No, we're not hearing you, Chris.
Yeah, go on.
What's your takeaway from this whole Mr. Sue development?
Well, I'm going to answer that, and then I'm going to go back to that statement you made about the Americans, because I think you're misquoting the report.
Okay, all right.
I do believe I share Adam's view. I thought what Mr. Jagdeo was trying to do was jump ahead of a final version, edited and possibly with the interview by Mr. Sue and perhaps anyone else coming out. And so Mr. Jagdeo thought, well, look, the better thing to do is for me to take a jump by the time it comes out, the matter will have been stale news. I think that is what perhaps might have motivated Mr. Jagdeo, because quite frankly, I'm not sure, and Adam, you're the man here. I would have thought the copyright on that interview would have been owned by the newspaper or the news agency, and not Mr. Jagdeo. And therefore,
I think the copyright will only kick in with the finished product. That would be considered raw footage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I stand corrected. But yeah, so what we have to do is to wait and see when the final program does come out. Because I think what will happen, Mr. Jagdeo having taken that course of action, they will now have in the final broadcast version, deal with that accusation as well, that, this was a setup and all of that. Newspapers do that all the time. And
are there any red flags for you?
I didn't think it was an illegitimate question. Mr. Jagdeo is a seasoned politician. I remember him being interviewed by one of the great international journalists, Zina Badawi from the BBC. So what we have to do is to wait and see when the program finally comes out, and then we'll know exactly where facts stand and where rumors stand and where hearsay stands.
While we await the final program, any red flags from your perspective?
No, I would not want to make any accusation, even indirect. I know what I'm concerned about, and I'm not sure you will have time on this program, but I did want to talk about it. The opportunities for this in this 2022 budget the various loose funds. That $5 billion is not the only loose pool of fund. If you look, even in the so-called capital estimates, you will see lots of provisions that allow for undefined discretionary spending. And the reason I felt the opposition really fell down badly, because yes, you have lost it in Parliament. That's the story. But that matter should have been gone to court, because I can tell you, David, this year is $5 billion. You watch as monies become available, you have bigger and bigger sums going into that fund to help unforeseen needy cases, which is exactly what the Constitution provides for in the contingency fund.
Yeah, yeah. Let me bring in, that's a very, very important observation you've made, and we'll come back to it. Let me bring in Henry here to give his take on the Mr. Sue development. Jeffrey, you've been in that ring, so to speak, for quite a long time. Were you surprised at what came out there during that interview?
I was surprised in terms of the fact that she did had the consent of Mr. Sue to say those things. You see, Sue would come out and say, I never said them. But somehow or the other, you don't just say, I am not disclosing my source. You will say, that's only because your source has not given you the right to disclose. No journalist, if a man tells you don't say this, I'm giving you confidence, will not go and disclose it. But she somehow had the right to disclose. And as a result, she disclosed it. So I was a bit surprised that that occurred. After all, Sue lives in Guyana. Sue got a Senate president, more or less, is the man on the take. It means that he can be in jeopardy. But when I sit back and think about it, nothing can't happen to Sue, because if anything happened to Sue, is the government going to take blame? Even if Sue did somebody else something and they act against Sue, people will say it's the government. So effectively, Sue is relatively secure in what has taken place. Now, that said, corruption don't affect governments in Guyana. Indeed, we're not even there's not what I usually call a united public opinion. And nothing changes. Nobody going to vote for the PPP because they're corrupt. You prove that Jeffery is corrupt or not corrupt, as the case may be. It doesn't happen. I would say more that even if it happened, it's so minuscule that it don't change no government. So this here ain't going to affect the politics in Guyana, but it would affect Jagdio's image abroad, because a lots of people and people who are in all sort of position are concerned associating with people that this kind of accusations are being made. And therefore it would affect his reputation. There's no question about it. Imagine he's got, I don't know, maybe 1 million honorary doctorates of one sort. If he goes now, and one person only got to get up on the board and say, well, this man is on a thing for corruption. About international journalism, award winner. This thing, it affects, it would weaken you internationally. And perhaps that is the intent. Because the people know what I know here, is that you say corruption don't make anybody vote for anybody one way or another in Ghana in any substantial way. So that's not going to be an effective issue. So that's essentially my take on Sue, that it's an attempt to actually weaken Jagdio's position rather than anything gonna happen in terms of elections in so on. So, but let me come back and say, when I look at what the Americans said in the document, you got to ask yourself, who are the major stumbling block for chair governance? You said it. You just said it. The PPP wrote, and Carter said it before he left and never came back for 10 years. He said Mr. Jagdeo is a bright man and so on and so on, but the party would not allow him to do the following very things they're asking for now. Share this and so on. So effectively, who is the party? Ms. Jagan gone. No, who is the party? So they're saying that this ain't gonna happen unless people start realizing we gotta take what's going on in Guyana seriously. And there's no big strong man around. You understand? So I see all this as part of a process of trying to liberalize this country. The country needs liberalizing. So, and furthermore, when you come to a country like Guyana, because I heard Chris was saying, I don't know, I had to step out. I heard Chris was saying that the Americans did not make the point, the nature of inclusive governance. But I want to say that if you look at the history of all of this, if, as I pointed out to the Northern Ireland and elsewhere, anytime you have a bicommunal country in which two large ethnic groups control more than 80% of the population, you normally have a problem. And the problem is only solved when they're both at the table. Because lives in Northern Ireland, it's all over the place. About Banzarama and thing, he take over the whole story. It all in Fiji. It always causes problems. So I am not here saying if Americans should be specific, because as Adam was trying to say, there are different ways of going about doing. I said about the Swiss model is my preferred way, because not only I think that it would best represent all classes and ethnicities in Ghana, but I think it's the way to the future. Because even American society, why you think those people are in Washington, they feel left out. They always had the power, now the power shift. And they're behaving, they feel left out. They're saying, whoa, who take over this power? What do you think happened in Brexit? Same thing. You understand? People are feeling left out, and therefore you got to bring more of their people into the where power is, the cabinet. That is what you got to do throughout. So I believe the Swiss model holds something of a template as we go forward, not only for Guyana, but for other countries in which today, with the information people are having, they want to be involved in the decisions that affect their lives. They or their representatives must be now. That is what freedom means. Freedom means I make the decisions that affect my life. And this is not the old days. Yep, you pick up the cell phone, all people are spreading all sort of news on there. So effectively, you have to give people, ethnicities, whatsoever, women, everybody, the right to have to be at the decision-making table in a sensible and constructive manner.
And our own Arthur Lewis in a 1965 small book made that precise point. And I want to associate myself with Henry Jeffery. I don't think Mr. Sewell's thing is going to bring down the government. I don't think it's going to weaken the PPP. But I think when you link that revelation to the USAID report that has just come out, and to some other things that are happening, the big countries, the Americans, are saying to us that you all better fix Guyana, because Guyana has now become an important global player. And we cannot allow it to continue to be governed the way it is being governed. And I think that my understanding of US foreign policy and geopolitics is that they operate in a certain way. That journalist that came down here to interview Mr. Jagdeo does not have official blessings, but wherever American interest is, American media come, America watchdog organizations come, American religious organizations come. So therefore, in a sense, that journalist is representing American interests, if not at the governmental level, certainly at the level of American civil society. And I think what we are in the midst of here is the Americans saying that decision we made in 2020 may not have been the correct decision. For the last 18 months, shown that this country could explode, and we are not about to allow it to, because we have too much investment in that country. That is my preliminary reading of these little moves. Anyhow, Chris, you did say that I misrepresented the Americans, so here is your report, sorry.
Sorry, I missed the question.
You did say you wanted to go back to the USAID report because
yes, I did.
You felt I misrepresented it.
Yes.
Yeah.
What it referred to is the controversies and disputes over the 5-month period.
Yes.
So they were speaking of the 5, not in relation to the final declaration. But I mean, look, David, you can see it how you want.
So you want to split the final declaration from the 5-month. I mean, I know you're a lawyer and you're a technical man. You want to split one from the other.
Of course, I am saying the dispute, and I'm saying what the report said, sir. No, but I wanted to move on, David, if you would. If you would. Can I?
To what?
On this issue that it can't, what Henry made just now, that, the allegations or interviews and so on cannot change things. They can. We still have, because our electorate is so small, 7,000 votes change the equation. And so if you look at 2015 and if you look at 2020, I know you're saying the dispute is on, and the PPP said the same thing. There is a small group of people who are not bound to either the PNC or the PPP because of race and ethnicity. There's still a small group of people who are prepared to vote on issues, who are prepared to vote on matters like the rule of law, matters like abuse of power, matters like corruption. And I wouldn't be as pessimistic as Henry is. I do believe that final interview, when it is broadcast, will have an impact. I do believe if the government behaves in a particular way, and it were to take matters were to be taken to the court, and the court rules against it, and it's seen to be acting unlawfully and unconstitutionally, those things will count in the minds of right-thinking, objective individuals.
Henry Jeffery, you're bound to come in here because I know you have some clear thoughts on this.
Let me say first of all that on that point that you made, that I said it don't change election, not things, because I also pointed out that it can hurt Mr. Jagdeo going forward. So things can change in that way.
Yeah.
But I meant not change election.
Okay.
I am saying that the PPP won this election by about 6,000 votes overall, 6,700 votes. I'm saying if you look at the numbers Lowenfield put on the table, it's plenty rigging went on. And therefore, I have no, I can't with any justification. And if we go back to 2015, the PVP said the PNC rigged the election and they won by just one seat. So how you know that it's people who changing their views are not rigging these people, they're rigging elections all the time? You are assuming that. Go on.
You
are assuming that by looking at the subs that come out of the ballot box. But that cannot be assumed in a context like Ghana where people are rigging elections all over the place. So I am saying to you, until we can actually get proper numbers, I am not prepared but to put my neck out on that. But there are always a few people can change, but I'll make a better point to you that the Americans made in that thing. Even if you won by 1 seat or 2, you shouldn't be allowed to run a country divided like ours.
Yeah.
So you can't with 1 or 2 seats decide you spending all the money of the people of Guyana. How you gonna do that?
We ain't disagree. We ain't disagree on that. We don't disagree on that.
Exactly. So if we agree on that, what we are saying, the shared governance is important. Whether or not you can win by a margin, it's not winning by a margin. Because you can always manipulate people and win. Maybe you can get one of these small parties, get a couple seats.
That's a different issue, and I'm sure that has taken us the better part of decades.
But it's the fundamental issue.
Yes, but
the fundamental issue is shared governance because the government don't have the legitimacy, even if it win with 2, to really be doing what it's doing. It's got a legal thing, but it's the moral thing. It's the fundamental issue. So when you come and say, they can win by PNC, can win by a seat, they can win by a seat and knock off the 7,000 people at Christmas time. You think that winning by a seat give them the capacity to do that? No. I wrote then. They had no capacity to do that by winning by a seat. And therefore, although you can win the government on a majority winner takes all position, you have no right to be ruling a country as divided as ours. That's the point.
Adam Harris?
Yes, I'd like to make a point. I support Mr. Ram. I remember in 1992, there were many, many people who were disillusioned and they did not vote. Henry says, let's go to the ballot box. I say, let us look at the numbers who turn out to vote. And those numbers are up there. You will see that increasingly numbers were going down. In 2020, these numbers ballooned. And you were right. Rigging might have taken place either by padding the voters list or not. That's why this big call for a new voters list and all of that. But Mr. Ram is right when he says such an accusation can hurt people to the point that they just stay home. And that happened. I can tell you that when we had the first minority government, the 2011 elections, I think it was, many people stayed home. I was an active reporter. And when I went, I said, you haven't voted yet? And this was in so-called PPP strongholds. I can vote later. But they didn't intend to vote because they were angry. And this corruption thing, if I expect to get some money and I don't get it, my initial reaction is they can't give me because they're thief. Let them try. I ain't voting for them. And you stay home. That can have an impact on the elections. And I'm saying to you that this allegation, regardless how insignificant it seems, will have an impact. And Mr. Ram is right. There are right-thinking people who will stay home, and there are grassroots people who are dissatisfied with whatever they expected to come to them, who will stay home.
Adam, let me ask you a pointed question because you raise a very important point there. From all the data and stuff that I've heard, yes, there were some Indo-Guyanese who stayed home in 2015. You think after getting your family getting what how much million? 750,000? You think after getting all them flood relief, you think after getting all them resources that the PPP is sharing to Indian Guyanese community, you think corruption will make this nobody next election?
Yes, because it wasn't more than, not more than 7 or 8,000 people got that kind of money. The other thing about it is time hurts you. You and Henry and all, we can remember when we got a 50% increase in salary. Well, I didn't get it. I've been outside of it before. But within a year and a piece, that money disappeared. It was nothing. And people started to get angry again. You see the money where you pay them couple sugar workers? That disappear. They ain't gonna hold you up as God. They expect more. And when more don't come, they're done with you. They're gonna cuss you. That's how we are as people. That's human nature. So trust me, that corruption allegation.
I hear you, Adam, but the PPP got the capacity to give more now. That's it.
Well, that might be so. That might be so.
Christopher,
you gotta keep.
My brother.
There are people.
We're running down on time. Go ahead.
Yes.
You wanted to make some points about the budget.
Who are saying that they were eligible.
Yeah.
And they didn't receive.
Right.
And others who were not eligible received. That can also count in the equation.
Yeah. You wanted to say some more things about the budget. Henry, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say to Adam that he would make a good preacher. Because what you're asking me is to believe that it would happen. I am saying to you that you have no good evidence can demonstrate. Look at the people that turn out. You count them? You count anybody? But I am saying to you, you count the votes in the box. You are saying, believe me. Well, a lot of people go to church, they believe a lot of things. What I am saying to you, you don't have any concrete evidence to say things one way or the other. I wasn't saying it's not going to happen, please. I said, from my standpoint, too much rigging has been going on for us to make any such thing outside of what you were saying. Please believe me. Well, I don't believe you.
Chris, you wanted to make some observations about the budget.
Well, in terms of the budget, as you know, Raman McRae has been writing, it's now 32 consecutive years. And that took up over 50 pages. There are a few things that stand out for me. One, that the incorporation of the Natural Resource Fund in the budget was not made in accordance with my understanding of the law. The other thing, this creation of funds here and funds there, and the most obvious one was the $5 billion that allow the government to spend it as it sees fit is not what the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act is about. It is not what an appropriation is about. I am extremely disappointed at the performance of the opposition in this budget debate. They didn't do their homework. They seemed terribly ill prepared. On the other side, we now have the budget, this 22 over 21 was 40-something%. But if you take say 3 years ago, the budget has almost doubled, and you have not increased by a single day the time for the scrutiny of those figures. I calculated 1,871 pages. It has about 54 programs, the number of capital items, the number of line items run into hundreds, David. It simply is inappropriate to use standing orders, as AUC loves to talk about the Committee of Supply, to use those standing orders that were appropriate that we took on the days from the colonial parliament, to apply the same principle. When we had a few $100 million was all in the budget. Now a few $100 billion in the budget, and you have the same kind of time. You don't have independent scrutiny. And I've always embraced this principle, this policy that Clive Thomas had been advocating before he became a strong supporter of the coalition. And that was to have a parliamentary budget office, like in the United States, David. I know you guys.
He still advocates it. He's not here to defend himself, but I have to defend him. He still advocates it.
Yes. But well, he didn't. It wasn't practiced by the party.
Yes, but that does not mean that he.
All right, okay. It was to have a parliamentary budget office that could independently scrutinize those numbers. You have less money, or not even sufficient to keep up in terms of real money for the Auditor General office. The Integrity Commission is not operating. And we would allow all of these things to just pass without. Those are some of the issues. And I really believe, if the shoes were on the other foot, Nandalal would already have gone to court on the Natural Resource Fund and on that so-called $5 billion of a contingency that is now voted on. They don't have to account for it anymore, other than to the Auditor General. And how much can he do? He's got so many capital projects. You've got all these transformational projects to deal with. You've got continuing year projects. We just don't have the mechanism. And what Raman McRae is going to do, it's within the next week, we will have a kind of a prologue on the whole budget debate and coming out with our recommendation as to what we think needs to be the way forward. But I do believe the Natural Resource Fund, we have created a serious precedent in terms of the Natural Resource Fund and in terms of that $5 billion. Come next year, it could be much more. And the same principle, without, even the finance minister said money is fungible. No, in terms of the Natural Resource Fund, you have to identify the projects. My view, and I think this is what Anand Gulsaran, former Auditor General, said, that ought to be dealt with as a separate mechanism. And, again, the NRF, I think we should have some kind of entrenchment, because we're not only talking about a current government, we're talking about succeeding generations of people. So overall, I'm very disappointed in how this passed.
We are a little bit over time, but I'll still give Henry and Adam an opportunity for some closing thoughts if they want.
First of all, let me say that in my little article in Village Voice this week, you note that I pointed out that Suriname has 3 months. 3 months to deal with this issue, to discuss the budget, change the budget, do whatsoever. That is the parliamentary time. Indeed, international best practices says that it should never be less than 3 months. But we continue to go on with the old British system. We're not changing anything, and so forth. It's just like the majoritarian system that we have. The budget, I think the budget should be differently crafted. It should be based upon impact analysis of what is happening to women, what's happening to Africans, what's happening to Indians, what's happening to Amerindians. Show where the budget, how much are they benefiting from this budget, and why this one is so crafted, and how you expect them to be budgeted. Not just this broad-based thing. Today you can do that. Thomas Piketty and those people are doing it in America. So you will say, you will give the government less space, even in an autocratic place like this. You will give them less space, because when you do the budget and say the budget affect women, so Africans so, Amerindians so, and we expect this to happen, you have something to judge them against. You can't just come out and say, oh, it's poor people budget and all of that. Amerindians, as I said in the article, Amerindians are the poorest people, and so, has been said to be the poorest ethnic group in Ghana. Where's the policy? Where's the policy that tells us what must be done every single year in terms of budgeting to bring them somewhere? Nowhere. So it's a fundamental restructuring you need. Not simply the thing about sure, you should have a budget office, but a budget office is not going to work too well in a majoritarian parliament, because you get budget office, you set up your little committee that over this budget office, and it's a majoritarian committee, and can stymie anything you do. In America, you have a budget office, but the budget office is almost, they send their budget to the president. So effectively, it's a coming together of that sort of arrangement, because nobody has a majoritarian control over the other in the way it is in a British parliamentary system. I'm saying when you need a fundamental restore your budget in a modern way. Impact analysis. How many money go to Africa out of this budget? Or how many will go to this person, these groups, in women? How? And the disadvantage. So that is what the budget should focus on. And all this thing, we're building 100 roads. Are these roads generational roads? So you're building roads going to destroy in 3 months. We want to leave for the next generation, not money. You want to leave them roads that would last for 30 years. You want to leave them that kind of institutional infrastructure, hospitals, universities. That is what you're going to give them. You leave them, not money in the bank. That's a waste of time. What you want is to create institutions and physical property that will last, becomes generational and generic. By generic, I mean that these institutions and roads and whatsoever you set up can also be used for other business than oil, because oil going to slip, oil going to go, and therefore you have to set up that kind of arrangement. That is what you want to leave for future generation, not money. And if you're going building a whole lot of roads because of election, or you want to show off that you essentially you are doing things to the people, and the road break up in 3 years, we're leaving for the people. It is trying them. You have resources now to allow you to do this thing, to expand your vision, but the vision is the same. Oh, build them a road, and by the time election come around, they're going to say, we build them the road. By the time election finish, the road back up. So, but you got to sit down. These people got to sit down together. And therefore, the competition is not as fierce. You ain't got power to lose almost. The competition is not as fierce, and sit down and say, well, where are we going in the next generation? It's 30 years. What are we going to do? What are the institutions? What are the thing we want to build? No one party can't do this in Guyana. It cannot happen. It has not happened in the past, and it happened for 70 years. So thank you very much, David.
Adam Harris, are you still with us?
Well, I never went anywhere.
Oh, okay. I'm not hearing you.
No, but I mean, yeah, I support Mr. Ram wholeheartedly, and I support some of the points made by Henry, because indeed, a budget is not something that anyone thinks. And the one point I want to make, when Mr. Ram talked about the $5 billion that's thrown there, and only the Auditor General can look at it, and he ain't got the capacity. The inference is that there can be corruption. And that is what the opposition and everybody should look at. They tried to ask questions in the 4 days instead of 5. Discussions were cut by a day. And they said they got convoluted answers and all of that. Okay. Now is the time to try to look at every expenditure. Now is the time to document what's said to you so that you can refer to that, what is said, in the not too distant future. A lot needs to be examined. It's a monstrous budget with the oil money. I am afraid that we will see not much going to the people. Some of them get what? $1,000 a month increase in salary. Old age pensioners get, I think, was it $3,000? $3,000 more. You divide that by 30, and you get $300 a day. You're just giving them one beer every day if they drink. So, I mean, I understand what Mr. Ram is saying. I understand what Mr. Jeffery is saying, but I support Mr. Ram, and I keenly look forward to his analysis.
And certainly, if Mr. Ram would be gracious enough to come on Politics 101 to share with us his, what you call it? Not, it can't be the prologue. Prologue, no, that's what you call it, Chris? Christopher Ram?
Sorry, I missed you there.
No, I'm saying...
I was going to do an afterthought, a review of the whole process, including, whether it's going to become known as the dildo budget. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that's one of the things that stand out for this budget. Really sad. But
I was saying that, Chris, if you will be so gracious enough to come back to share with us your afterthought on the dildo budget. I like that, the dildo budget. And I agree, it's a shame that that's what our country, whatever else, brothers, I want to say this, whatever else we come out of slavery and indentureship with, we had some dignity and some respect for ourselves. And if you told my auntie, who was a member of the Women's Auxiliary, which was the women's arm of the PNC in those days, and I used to tag along and go to meeting with her, because she wanted to teach me politics. If you tell her, wake her up from her grave, and tell her that in the parliament, and we're going to big market, you're trying to me and say, look, parliament. If you tell her that is the place that they would be talking about dildo, she would die 1,000,000 times. Shame on our country. I hate to end on that note, but I can't take it. I can't take it. Brothers, thanks very much for coming on and taking us behind the news. And I look forward to bringing you back in a couple of weeks as we try to make sense of what's happening to our country and in our country. Good night. And to you, the audience, I missed you all last week, but I've come back this week. And I noticed that you all have stayed with us until the very end. The dildo budget, as Chris Ram said, what a shame. But join me tomorrow night as we talk Black history. Me and Tokumo Ogunse going to be rapping about Black history, Black empowerment, Black culture. We're going to take some of your calls and we're going to have the discussion on Black history. And then on Thursday night, I'm going to have the Reverend Apostle on. You know who I'm talking about. He will be making his first appearance on Politics 101. See you all. I'm gone.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.